give a programming talk this week, and instead I took a nap for the first time in a while. I'm sorry. Tune in for a Sparta's fucking programming talk like a month from now. Instead, Kieran was the only one with any slides even halfway prepared. So I've told him he can fill an hour telling us about design part 2, because he forgot so much shit, apparently.
Someone have a wireless mouse I can steal?
I
want to walk.
See, Brock's got so much, man.
Oh, yeah.
He's the one who comes prepared.
Well, it doesn't have the thingy.
No, it don't.
Brock has
There's
thingy.
no USB.
See, I asked the question, but I knew Brock would have it, so.
Brock always has thingies.
I know, he comes prepared. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah.
Do it.
It's a joke about sequels. It's fine.
Part 2, electric boogaloo.
We're just going to assume this works, I don't want to go to the next slide.
Electric Boogaloo.
So, hello everybody. I did a presentation last week on similar topic to what I'm going to talk about today, but as I talked about last time, I'm a designer, and something I stressed a lot was design is an iterative process. Part of that, and the skill of being a designer, is trying to iterate as little as possible to get the thing that you wanted, because it saves us money, time, and blah, blah, blah. So, this is my attempt at iterating on my last talk. Don't worry, it's not the exact same talk, it is covering new materials, but it's trying to hit more of the points that I really wanted to cover, because like I said, that was my first Smartest Off talk, first talk in general. I didn't really know how to time things out, didn't know how to prompt myself super well. So, welcome to Kieran's Game Design Talk Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, alternatively titled for some audiences, Here It Returns, Smartest Off Talk 13. I'm going to very quickly change the next slide so nobody can take a picture of that and hold it against
I mean, I got a video.
I know, but you can't, it's hard to screenshot.
Please go back, please.
Oh no, it doesn't work backwards. Damn it.
Oh, I will totally make it also a screenshot. Bam, there it is. I got it. That's kind of amazing.
So, the Final Fantasy title font is bullshit because they put spaces between everything, and then you put more space between each thing. It's stupid, I hate it. But anyways, so brief recap of what I talked about last time. In my mind, designers are a lot like directors. It's our job to have a knowledge of as many parts of like a game development workflow, like art, programming, not just the design as we can, because that's how you can design things effectively. The more we learn about each of those individual things, the better we can utilize the skills of the people we're working with. It's the difference between making something where you just have a vision, but you don't know how to effectively communicate it. No matter how skilled the people you're working with are, if you don't tell them to do the right thing, they'll make a really good version of what you tell them, but it doesn't make that thing any better than the bad thing you told them to make. So, a good director is the difference between something like, you know, the Star Wars prequels, despite how you may feel about them, they're kind of like bland, versus like, if you've ever watched the 2003 version of Old Boy, don't watch the American remake, please don't. It's got Josh Brolin, but it's not good. The next thing was, in my opinion, whether or not a game is a good game, a bad game, a good game, or a great game is up to the designer. It's related to the thing I just said, where if your programmers are great, your artists are great, but your designers are shit, they're gonna make a really nice looking version of the shit thing that you told them to make. It'll work well, it'll look great, but it's still not fun, or it's not memorable. Like I was just saying, we need to learn to develop these games in a more efficient way. That's how we save like the limited resources we have, time, money, the amount of people we have. A big way of doing it is finding a process that works for you. A big thing about my last presentation is I started with the whole like, I think the order was what, why, how. That's actually, the point of that was that's personally the way I go through like a design process. I ask myself like, what is the effect I want something to have? Why is it not hitting it? How can I change that it's hitting it? And I just loop that until I eventually get to something that is what I want. Speaking of doing things effectively, I showed this last time. This was my Kingdom Hearts Keyblade made out of cubes. Ellie was slightly upset at me because I didn't properly show my credentials of being a cube artist. So this is Michelangelo. It's the game I made in 497. I was the artist for this game, yet I had absolutely zero experience in any kind of modeling software. So I used cubes in Unity to make everything. The reason I'm showing this off is not just to show you how insane I am, which I am, but because despite how ridiculous this is, I managed to learn how to do it in an efficient way. If you look at things like this glider, you can see a lot of parts of it are made up of these rings. So those rings are also present in this Keyblade. Well, it may sound ridiculous that this game was comprised of thousands of individual cubes. I didn't go in and individually place thousands of individual cubes. I created basic shapes that I could use and repeat just like an actual modeling process. So that saved a lot of time that I could use to focus on other things. To get a little bit specific, I told you last time about the tool Ellie made me that allowed us to bake meshes together in Unity. So that's what like our church environment looks like all meshed together. To show you it is actually made up of individual cubes, this is what it actually looks like if you don't mesh it together. All of these are individual boxes scaled and rotated to try and make smooth arches and all that. It's a whole bunch of bullshit. But like I said, I only made like one of these pillars, made it a slice, copied it over. So you can find efficient ways to do dumb bullshit, and that's a thing I really enjoy doing. Roughly, this part of the church was individually 4,200 cubes. I did the math at one point because I had to go in and bake all of it together so I could like, Unity gives you a count of thing. It was a fun time. So going back to here, the point that I was trying to make last time was that great games are more than just fun gameplay. They're a like well-designed combination of a bunch of really good aspects. Like I said, well-crafted combination of many elements, and that's more of what I want the focus of this talk to be, is how do we design something that isn't just a fun mechanic, or isn't just a good story, or isn't just good art. It's a combination of all these things. So to start off with this, what I wanted to do last time is have a little bit more interactive of a talk, so I actually made myself do this time. What are some of your favorite games? Anyone? Raise your hand, tell me what your favorite game is. Ellie.
Wolfenstein New Order.
Great. Brock.
Super Mario Galaxy.
Anybody else? All comers. I have to hit an hour, so.
Mountain Blade Warband.
Okay.
Halo Reach.
Okay.
Do anything.
Okay.
Hollow Knight.
What one? Hollow Knight?
Tekken 7.
Okay. Why? Anyone? Anyone who just told me their favorite game. Tell me why it's your favorite game.
Because it actually has good sword combat.
And you said it was Mountain Blade, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Tekken 5 and 6, but now there's super moves in it.
Ellie can confirm.
Can't confirm.
All right. Brock.
It's a tight platformer.
Yours was a
Mario Galaxy.
Mario Galaxy. I remembered it was a Mario one.
Weapon wheels and nukes.
And yours was
Wolfenstein.
Wolfenstein. Yeah, that's fair. Going back to you.
Also because there's an entire political system in trading and war and armies and yeah.
Okay. So, the point I want to make here is it's really important to properly understand why we like games. Being in the gel, I've seen a lot of like the up and coming people in the program because I'm around like quite a lot of professors, so I see things. I'm also TAing one of the classes. So, a lot of game designers design or are game designers because they played something at some point that inspired them for some reason. They want to like replicate that feeling for people. For me, that game was Fallout. If I go back in my mind, the first instance of a game I played where I thought a lot of things really blended together well to create a unique experience was Fallout 3. For a lot of people, the reason I had Zelda there for a second was because if you talk to a lot of people, they're like, Brooks, give me the look. Zelda, pretty much any of them, like the original Link to the Past, like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, it's a pretty good one. So there's not a problem with that. There's a saying that some people have where like there is no original idea in game design anymore. Pretty much anything you make is gonna be done by someone at some point in some way. And there's a saying that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. I believe that. I don't think there's anything wrong with making something based on something. But my personal opinion on that is that comprehensive imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Bad imitation is potentially almost just insulting to the people that originally made the thing or the fans that like it. It also usually doesn't work. I'll get a little bit more into that later. And I think that it's a real problem that you see with a lot of games nowadays, is you see some game comes out, it's successful, then you see a bunch of games that try and imitate it, but they don't really imitate what was actually good about it. They imitate some kind of surface level thing that everyone like latches onto. And it's not necessarily malicious. I'm sure some companies like saw the success of a game and went, we can make something kind of like that really fast and cash in. But some people generally try and recreate a game. I think they just have a flawed understanding of what exactly they like about it because they didn't dig deep enough. I could talk all day about this and just stand here and talk without actually trying to prove anything, but I have a habit of trying to actually prove points instead of just making them. So I will ask myself the same question I asked you guys. what's my favorite game? So this is the opportunity where I finally get to do the thing that I said I would probably do at some point. I get to do a long talk on a game I really like. Some of you might be able to figure out what it is. I'm wearing clothes based on it. It was already in my slides. Today is the day I finally get to talk about. It didn't go. Dark Souls. Boom!
He was ready. You planned this.
I planned this very intentionally. I like Dark Souls a lot. It's actually probably tied with Fallout 3 for one of my favorite games I've ever played. Not remastered. It's fine, but it's not the one I played originally. So, now I ask you guys, why do people like Dark Souls? Anybody. If you've played Dark Souls and you like it, if you've played it and you don't like it, but you think you know why other people like it, if you've never played it, but you have a pretty good idea of why people might like it. Go ahead. Why do you think people like it? This isn't a trick question. There's no right or wrong answer.
It's difficult but not unfair.
Okay.
I think a lot of people like to just play it for the meme because the game has a reputation for being unforgiving and difficult.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, mine.
Well, that's interesting. So, as you guys saying, do people like Dark Souls because it's hard? I really don't believe that's the case, and I'm not just saying that because I'm saying it's not hard. It's a difficult game. It's designed to be that way. But if that's all that made Dark Souls special, all that made people remember it, then what are all of these? We spawned an entire series of games that we call the Souls series, pretty much based solely on the idea that Dark Souls are popular because it's hard. But none of these have gotten any of the kind of like esteem or like lasting effect that Dark Souls has. Even like the Dark Souls sequels. And some of these, I haven't played Sinner, Surge, Immortals, Lords of the Fallen, but I played Neo. Neo's fun. It's got hard combat. It feels good. I'd say it's like an objectively improved combat system over Dark Souls, but I didn't beat it. I don't think I've ever talked to a person that played it and beat it. They're all like, I got like a couple hours in, and then I just kind of stopped. So if it's just because it's hard, then why don't these work? What's the difference? Some people say it's because it's got this rich, deep lore that people love reading about and like can get to easily. It's got rich lore. Again, there are a lot of games that have rich lore that are boring to play. So, what is it about Dark Souls that makes people like it? Why do I love it? Why is it one of my favorite games from a design perspective? Well, it was kind of a trick question. You can get mad at me. I don't care. Because it's not just one of those things. It's not because it's hard. It's not because it's got deep lore. It's not because it looks pretty. It's because all of these things put together, in the way they're put together, create an experience that sticks in people's minds. It is a difficult game, but it's not difficult just because they want it to be hard. The game is about something. It wants to teach you a message or a lesson. The thing it's trying to teach you, if you pay attention to the parts of the story that aren't actually like told to you normally in ways that people can understand without looking into like item descriptions, the game is about this idea of the character or the people in this world losing hope and then giving up and losing their humanity. It's exactly what the Ended Curse and the Hollowing is in the game. You can die over and over and over and over and over again, but you always come back until you basically just lose hope. And then you go hollow and you're insane and you've lost. In Dark Souls, there's no, get in here. He sees I'm talking about Dark Souls, he's coming in here. Yeah. You were gonna walk by and then you're like, he's talking about Dark Souls. It's happening. So there's no penalty in Dark Souls. There are games, or at least Dark Souls 1, one of my biggest gripes with Dark Souls 2 is they added this goddamn system where every time you die, you lose some of your maximum health until you use an item that restores your humanity. And I'm like, why would you do this to me? If I'm dying over and over again and I'm clearly struggling, why would you make it harder for me to do better?
Wasn't that in Demon Souls?
Demon Souls might have also done it. Dark Souls 2 definitely. Full disclosure, I haven't been able to play Demon Souls. I've never had access to a console that was able to play it. But even like, looking into it, I still think Demon Souls doesn't like as effectively encapsulate all these things as Dark Souls does. Dark Souls, to me, is a hard game, but it's a game that encourages this idea of being prepared. I was really upset when they decided to call the Dark Souls Special Edition the Dark Souls Prepare to Die. I would have preferred it was Prepare or Die. From the very beginning, like first few stages, like everyone points to the first thing you do in the game is you fight a boss, or they tell you to fight a boss, and then you know, you find out that you don't actually have to fight him. You're supposed to go to the side and leave this out the back door, and then you come back later once you have the equipment. But I think that's intentional. You're supposed to be teaching the player that if you run into a situation where you think you're not prepared, probably because you aren't, and you should wait and come back later. Similar instances of this happen the first time you find a Black Knight in the Undead Burg. He's just looking the other way, and you see him, and you have almost nothing, and you're like, I probably shouldn't fight that guy. And if you do, he kicks your ass, because you're not ready. That's kind of this whole thing, is going, fighting something, realizing that it probably wasn't a good idea, not losing hope, coming back. Now he's interested too. And yes, there's a lot of lore, and yes, it's not easily accessible, but that's kind of the point. It's not just there because if it was there just to have a lot of lore, it would give it to you. It would like ramble nonsense at you as you were walking down a giant long hallway. But it only is there if you want to get it, and it's only there as a reward to the player. There's a lot of stories in Dark Souls, the characters you meet, the quests you go on for them, the backstory you learn about the things you're fighting. These two characters in particular, Quelaag, not Quelaag, that's a different character, and the Fair Lady, who is her sister. Quelaag is a boss you fight on your way to get to the first bell tower. When you're fighting her, your assumption is that this is something here to stop me from activating this bell that is the first goal of my journey. But once you beat her, you ring the bell, you go down. By chance, you might discover that there's a hidden wall. And behind that hidden wall is this character, the Fair Lady. If you have the right item, you can talk to her, or she can talk to you, because you don't actually talk. She's also, I don't think she's deaf. She's really, really sick. But you discover that the reason this character was here fighting you so adamantly and stopping your progress was because they weren't trying to stop you from ringing the bell. They're protecting their sister. Their sister is sick. They need humanity to get better. This person has been set up here fighting people for years and years and years and years, getting stronger and stronger and stronger to make this person healthy again, their sister that they care about. So this boss fight that you just struggled against for so long now takes on a new meaning. It makes you feel something about it, and you almost regret doing it. And because you regret doing it, there's this whole quest line you can go on to help this character, make them strong again, make them healthy. And if you do that, you're rewarded with a cool shortcut and a bunch of spells and stuff. Like I said, these stories and stuff aren't just here for flavor. They're to tie into this thing that the game is about. This idea of continuing past adversity to, like, completing your ultimate goal, whatever it happens to be, or these small rewards along the way. A good example of this, I think, is the Ceaseless Discharge, is a giant, ugly boss that is incredibly hard to fight normally, and it's an entirely optional boss. You don't have to fight this boss. But if you do, when you go there, it won't attack you until you attack it, or you pick up a set of armor that's near it. And once you pick it up, the boss gets mad at you, it attacks you. If you manage to beat it normally, then good for you, you are really good at this game, because I've never done it normally, I've always cheesed it. But the way you cheese it isn't just like abusing some dumb glitch. This boss has a story to it. This armor is on the dead body near him. It belongs to, I think it says it's the original like queen of some, or not queen, witch. And then later you'll find an item that says that the witches made a ring for a guy who had some incredible like curse on him where he just spewed lava from him. I wonder if it's Ceaseless Discharge. He was constantly spewing lava from himself. It's in horrible pain, so maybe he needs a ring that, you know, makes himself less terrible to be around. And this, like, again, this boss fight, this difficult thing that you did takes on a new meaning in that this guy didn't want to fight you. He's pissed because you just looted the corpse of his family and is now trying to get it back. The way you cheese this boss, is if you just take it and run away and try and come back from the way you came from, and you get to the exit, he just leaps over this, or attempts to leap over this giant cliff, fails, slips, holds on by like a single finger, and if you just hit that, he falls off. This boss isn't supposed to be something that you, like, it's hard because, like, the character is desperately trying to fight against you to get something back that you stole. And if you run away and seem like you're going to escape, he uses one last ditch like move of desperation in order to try and like succeed, and then puts himself vulnerable, and then you kill him, and you get a bunch of souls, and all that's neat. But it's an experience. When you first do that and you see him jump over this ledge and get stuck, you're like, that was a weird thing for him to do. But then, as you get these rewards and when you go and look at them and see what their stats are, you're told these story things as you're finding out the weird effects they have. Like, you can't find out that this ring negates lava damage without also learning that it belonged to this guy and he lost it and he's sad about it. These things are tied together and you learn them at the same time. Dark Souls isn't about the poison swamp that everyone hates and is awful because it is. It's about that there's this poison swamp that's awful that everyone hates because it is, that leads to this weird gigantic tree. This is the thing I mentioned about Ash Lake last time in a brief discussion. This tree is filled with monsters. It's precarious just to move around in. But if you manage to make it all the way to the bottom, you get to Ash Lake, which is like one of the most beautiful places in the game comparatively because of the way they created this progression. You go from this terrible, weird swamp place filled with poison and bad things. This is actually a GIF. I'm sad it didn't play, but some of you may have seen it if you're fans of Dark Souls. He's just walking through a swamp and then something just comes and smashes him with a boulder, and it's hilarious and I love it. But it's true, this place sucks, and you go to a place that slightly less sucks, and then when you go over all of that, you get to this incredible place where there's a dragon that gives you a new covenant and a whole bunch of rewards. But it also gives you this sense of wonder above all things else, where you're going down. You are on a lake, you go down underground, and you come out and there's a sky with clouds and a bunch of trees that go up to nothing. There's nothing above you but this cloud system, so how does this make any sense? Well, it all ties into this same thing that the game was telling in the beginning, where originally there was just this land of a bunch of trees, a bunch of lakes, a bunch of ash, and then apparently on top of that is the world we live on now. So the rewards that this game gives you for beating bosses isn't just cool experience and cool gear to go on the next thing. It's an event, a memory that sticks with the player. Like, doing this in and of yourself, I told you about the Ash Lake theme last time, like this really powerful chorus that goes on where people, it's like just some dude belting a cool opera music, kicks in the minute you walk out and the light blooms and you see this amazing environment. And also just to the left here is a giant hydra that starts spewing magic at you if you could walk a bit too far. But if this game was designed just to be hard, that dude would spew magic at you the second you walked out. But he doesn't. It gives you time to take in what you're seeing. It gives you time to appreciate the view that you have. And prepare yourself to fight this enemy. It gives you this opportunity. Andrew Dennis has a opinion of Dark Souls where he just simplifies it down to you just fight a giant gray ugly boss that you can fight the next giant gray ugly boss and then fight the next giant gray ugly boss, which there are a bunch of giant gray ugly bosses. The world in Dark Souls sucks. It plays into this thing I talked about earlier where you're overcoming these adversities, the hardships, the ugly things in this world to try and basically you're trying to reignite the flame is the mission you have this whole time. You're trying to bring it back from this terrible, terrible state. So you have to get past all the terrible, terrible things. But it's not all fighting giant ugly monsters that are standing in your way. Sometimes you have to fight fights that you don't necessarily want to fight, or fights that you think you have to fight. For people who play Dark Souls, how many people remember fighting Sith the Great Red Wolf? Why do you remember fighting Sith the Great Red Wolf? Is it because it was hard? Or is it because as you're fighting him, as his health gets lower and lower and lower, he starts limping. He starts moving slower. He starts becoming less effective at fighting. He becomes easier as the fight goes on, but you feel bad for doing it. But you can't not do it. He has a required item that you need to progress. And it's sad and you hate yourself, but you have to do it. He's guarding the grave of his owner. It sucks, but it's so cool too. The fight, it's a sad fight, but it's an intense fight. And as it winds down, you start regretting that you're fighting it, but you can't stop. There's no way to stop. You could leave with the homeward bone, but you still have to come back and do it. It sucks, and that's the thing about Dark Souls, is you have to make it through the things that suck, the things that are hard, to get to the things that are beautiful, like Ash Lake, like the story of the Fair Lady, like the story of all these characters that you help on these quests. All of these are important. A well-designed experience is better than the sum of its parts. If this game was just hard, it would be, we wouldn't have these things if it was just hard. It would be another Sinner's Soul Sacrifice, or whatever. I think those are two different games I just combined into one. It'd be another Neo, it would be another Lords of the Fallen. If it was just that, it might be fun for some people, but it wouldn't last for people. one of these things without the other makes the other less meaningful. The difficulty wouldn't feel as worthwhile if you didn't have the payoff of the characters. The characters wouldn't be as interesting or feel like as much of a reward if you didn't have the difficulty that you're like fighting against the whole time. I meant to start a timer, and I feel like I am rushing through this. 3 minutes. So this is the part where it becomes a little less structured because, like I said, proving the point, this is one example of one game. A game where I think people stop at the surface when analyzing why people like it. Most people here, when I asked what people liked about it, said, because it's hard, and people like a hard game. But I don't think it's just that. There's so much more about it that is important in justifying why it's hard, making the hard parts of the game worthwhile. Other games do similar things to accomplish different tasks. Like, for Dark Souls, the idea is you're trying to overcome, all these obstacles to reach a goal and reignite the world and make it beautiful again. So the difficulty is important in that. Something like Undertale, I talked about, I think is about deception for the most part. The reason it's so cutesy, the reason the music is so fun, the reason there's so many jokes is so that when it takes the hard turn to deep, meaningful whatever, where people accuse you of genocide, it hurts a lot. Like, it hits you, you weren't ready for it, and it doesn't feel like it cheated because it's all built into the way the game works, both mechanically, artistically, thematically. Like I said, they don't trick you and say, you have to kill every enemy in the game, and then once you do, we tell you that you've secretly been genociding people and that you've wiped out the population, you're a bad person for doing it. The tagline for this game, if I remember more or less correctly, was something along the lines of like, you don't have to fight a single enemy. Like, you can just be nice to everyone. So if you choose to do things like grind, you know that this isn't the thing you have to do, but you're doing it because I like doing RPGs or whatever, and then they hit you with this deep, hey, you're kind of a dick, walking around just beating up random people for no reason to get experience that you don't actually need in order to progress. Things like Okami, it's all about refreshing the world, bringing life back to it, so things like art played a big part in that. It's usually a hand-in-hand thing, art creation and rejuvenation. So the reason it's an art wolf, the reason it looks like a painting, is because it all ties into that theme of creation, rejuvenation. Breath of the Wild is about exploration, about discovering new things. They don't stop you anywhere. You can do whatever you want, wherever you want. Fallout, I said, is all about character creation. In fact, now it's time for Fallout talk. Fallout is all about, it's a character-based RPG, where the things that are important, like I said in the last talk, is character, the role you're playing in the game, and the world, open world character-based RPG. More so than other Fallout games, I think Fallout 3 does this way more effectively, because it gives the player a better understanding of the feelings of their character within their world. I hate with a passion Bethesda's marketing campaign in which they assume that the reason I like anything related to Fallout is because it's blue and yellow and it's the Vault Boy and it has a number on it. I bought one Vault Boy figure back when I was in freshman year of college or something, and then after that they changed every single Vault 101 based bobblehead figure you could buy to, I don't even know what the hell I think Fallout 4 just came out, so it was Vault 111. The problem with that is that as a player, the thing I cared about wasn't just vaults, I cared about Vault 101 specifically, because in the opening of the game, that's where, well, it's not where you're born, secretly. It's where you grow up, it's where you meet your dad, where you meet Jonas, this cool dude who helps your dad build you a BB gun for your birthday. It's where you meet your friend, it's where you fight your bullies, it's where you learn all these basics of survival. And then it's ultimately where tragedy happens. Then you get kicked out in the real world, and then eventually you come back and solve these problems. So Vault 101 in and of itself has meaning. Who cares about Vault 111? Who here played Fallout 4 and is like, man, Vault 111, that was so cool. I walked in, I got cryogenically frozen, and then I left. Who cares about that? That's not, I don't want to buy a Vault 111 bobblehead because I have no attachment to Vault 111. I want to buy Vault 101 because that created a memory in my head. This incredibly interesting way to combine tutorialization with character development, with story, with teaching the player information about the world. Fallout 3 did all of that so effectively. Fallout New Vegas, they play a cutscene and then you wake up in a town that is cool and everyone's nice and then someone teaches you how to shoot a gun. That's so much less effective. And it's so, like, I don't care about the world. I don't care about the character I'm playing as. You have done nothing to make me do any of these things. So, how can we do what they do? There are companies with a lot of money, a lot of people, and a lot of time. So how can we make something like Dark Souls, like Fallout, like Breath of the Wild, like Undertale, like Okami? Something that has reason and purpose behind almost every decision that is in the game. We don't have those things. We have zero budget in our games unless you are just paying people to help you, and I guess good on you for having that much money. We don't have a lot of time. You know, we're working on like 3-week sprints if you're in 455, or semester-long projects if you're in 497, 498, which still comparatively isn't a whole lot of time. And we don't have that many people. At most, like teams of 9. So it's really hard for us to make these kinds of experiences. Or is it? In I want to say it was 455, Will Jeffrey had us play a game called Midas. I'm almost hesitant to tell you guys about it because it's such a short experience that you could just go online, find out on a Flash website, and play it. It's like, I don't know, like 10 levels of nothing more on your screen than like this at any given time, with a simple mechanic of you jump, certain blocks that you touch, certain things you touch will get turned to gold. If they're gold and they're floating, they now have weight, so they fall. It's a very simple mechanic, but it also ties itself really well to a message, a meaning. Fuck it. The twist at the end is this whole time you're doing all these things, you can eventually reach your wife. I don't know in the context of King Midas if it's his wife or not, I'm assuming so. You're trying to reach your wife, and then you go through all these puzzles, you get closer and closer and closer, and then the final puzzle, it turns out, because of the way it's set up, you can't get to your wife. Anytime you get close enough to her in order to be with her, you have to touch her, which turns her to gold. And it's this like weird thing where you're going through this whole time and then, ooh, that stung. But I remember it. This was a year ago, a Flash game I played for 5 minutes. I remembered its name, I remembered the way it looked, I remembered the way I felt when I got to that last level that was 10 levels in or whatever. And we could make this. Who here knows how to, like, on collision enter, set a tag on something, or change its rigid body so it reacts to gravity? Anyone could make this. Any of us. Like, Jeremy, when I was in 482, said, like, anybody here could make Beat Saber. I don't know about that. Anybody here could make that. Like,
It's such a specific.
It's
like,
true.
I can hear it in my brain.
Anybody can make Beat Saber. It's so easy. There's a lot of shit in Beat Saber. Have you ever tried beat mapping? Talk to Colin Wing. It's hard. So, I want to do a quick review, and then I'll kind of wrap this up, but not really wrap it up because I kind of want to do like a questions thing. So, having a deeper understanding of why we like a game is important. For a long time after I played Fallout 3, I was like, why do I like Fallout 3? Well, I just like, you know, post-apocalyptic worlds and RPGs. So I played a bunch of games that were similar, but nothing ever gave me that same feeling. And the reason I got into game design was I was curious, why do I care about this so much? Why was Fallout 3 so effective when none of these other games that are really similar to it were? Why do I like Dark Souls so much, but Sinner, Soul Sacrifice, fucking, I don't even, Neo, and the other ones, why do those just like drop dead after a week and people have to pay people on YouTube to say, Sinner, Soul Sacrifice has harder bosses than Dark Souls, 10 out of 10, and then everyone plays them like, I don't care. To me, game design is like a combination of like math, art, and psychology. Like the math of balancing those resources I talked about in the beginning, like the amount of time you have, the amount of money you have, the amount of people you have, and using them effectively. The art of knowing how to create these connecting threads, and the psychology to properly understand why people like certain things. It's really easy to go, people like Dark Souls because it's hard. But it's not that simple. There's so much more going on that makes this a lasting experience for people. Designing games with the intent behind them is what creates that memorable experience. I can't think of a single game that people like still talk about to this day, despite how old it is, that isn't something more complex than just like a mechanic. Like the reason we still talk about Call of Duty this day is because there's 17,000 of them and they still make them. Like, if Call of Duty, like, 1 had come out and then they hadn't made another one, we wouldn't, like, no one would be like, man, Call of Duty 1 was just so great. It changed gaming, or maybe they would have, but, like, there was nothing created like a deep, meaningful experience in Call of Duty as opposed to, like, any other shooter game. It just happened to be the one that came first, and now it has a bunch of money so they can push it out every year. You don't have to be or a AAA studio or make a AAA RPG to make a game that has an impact on someone. You don't have to make the next Skyrim, the next Fallout, the next Dark Souls, the next Zelda. You can make a Flash game with 10 levels and a simple mechanic as long as you design the experience around that. Someone had something in mind they wanted to make other than just a game where I touch blocks and gravity falls. So that's kind of the end. Thank you. I think this went slightly better than my first talk. I prompted myself much better. But I want to know, does anyone have any questions? Because I talk a lot, but I also like to talk with people. So I want to know what your thoughts are. Am I full of shit on things? Does anybody have any questions about something I said specifically? You.
What's a game you just thoroughly dislike and why doesn't it work?
I played Metal Gear Survive.
Sure, go for that one.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Why is Metal Gear Survive bad? Is it because Kojima wasn't involved in it? Was the story not good? It's like, I would not compare Metal Gear Survive to any Metal Gear Solid game. If I had to choose a game to compare it to and whether or not it accomplished that feeling successfully, I would compare it to something like Orcs Must Die. Because that's what that game is when you're playing it. When in the moment like that they want you to have fun, it's Orcs Must Die. Like, you're given lanes things come from, a set structure that you have to build stuff around, a set amount of resources, and then you do it. The problem with that is that they spend so much time making you get the resources to make these like barriers or whatever, and then if you fail, you have to go and spend another 60 minutes to gather enough stone to make 3 more fences. Like, what the game is at its core and what the mechanics they filled around it, the story they filled around it, like, when I'm sitting there fighting, none of the Metal Gear stuff has any bearing on what's happening. I'm just stabbing a zombie through a fence with a spear. And that's pretty much what 99% of that game boils down to, because no one's gonna spend the 7 days it takes enough to create, or get enough materials to craft a turret and a flame tile and a pusher block and a like spike barrier. It takes so long, and if you mess up, then you have to do it all over again. It's so much easier to just place a fence, throw a Molotov, stab a dude. Like, there was such a disconnect there between what they wanted the player to do and how they went about making them do it. The very last boss fight in Metal Gear Survive is actually kind of fun, because they just spawn in things for you to use. You don't have to worry about crafting the stuff to make it. They're just like, here's some flame platforms, here's some turrets, here's some explosive barrels, here's some fences, here's some like mortars. Like, they just give it to you. And when the game is doing what it wants you to be doing, it's fun. Like, I could give, actually, I'll argue and say the story for Metal Gear Survive is weird and dumb, but all Metal Gear stories are. And it does a pretty good job of closing up a plot hole from Metal Gear Solid 5. I'll give it that. Like, it tells you what happens to Sahelanthropus, because it just goes away and is never mentioned again in any Metal Gear game, so it's not the worst story. It's not great, but it's not the worst. But like that, like, I played it and beat it just because I wanted to see, and I don't like Undertale just because I don't particularly like the humor. I don't like that game because it's just terribly designed, and there's no reason for anything that's happening. It's just like, we think this would be fun, and it's not. Anybody else? Anybody want to tell me why Dark Souls 2 is better than Dark Souls 1, and I'll fight you for hours?
No.
So yeah, that's kind of the point. I see a lot in the game dev program of, I want to make a game because this game made me feel a certain way, but we don't do a good enough job of understanding why we like that game. Like, we like Hollow Knight because the difficulty was really hard and like it just felt good. But Hollow Knight's also really, really charming. Like, the enemies you fight, the characters you're helping, the collectibles you get are all tied into this idea of like this bug world. And you know, I'm not just picking up a collectible, I'm rescuing this little cute silkworm. Alan? Grub to return it to its home and repopulate this abandoned city. Like, it's more than just combat. It's more than just that. But when you see people say like, I'm gonna make a game like Hollow Knight, they're like, smooth combat. That's all it takes. And that's where they stop. And then they make something and it's not what they wanted. It doesn't feel anything like it because it's more than just the mechanic. It's more than just the art. It's more than just the sound. It's all of these things put together in a meaningful and deliberate way. That's it. Wait for it. Wait for it.
Are we gonna put it back?
Some of you walked in late, so there's that. I Photoshop sometimes. I really shouldn't.
They're always good.
Hey, it's Link.
Yeah.
Never good.
They're always